Welcome back to Always a Bigger Fish, our Star Wars podcast, answering questions you didn't think to ask, continuing our coverage of Jedi Fallen Order, a name which is impossible to remember unless you write it down. We are once again talking... Well, okay, so we were supposed to be doing Dathomir plus Ilum, but because my notes are incredibly confusing, I think we're just doing Dathomir Part 1, which is fine. Turns out play until you defeat 2 big bosses is not a very clear instruction if you have several levels where there are multiple bosses. My bad. I don't want to point any fingers, but you know.
Yeah, I was I wasn't sure because like when you get to you get to his master, I'm like, is that what he meant? Is that the second big boss? Is that what he meant by second big boss? And then I went to Ilum because I texted y'all, I'm like, are we supposed to do Ilum? And y'all didn't answer me right away, so I was like, I'm just gonna keep going unless I think that I'm wildly off the mark here. And then when I defeated I wouldn't necessarily call them big, but there were 2 of them.
They're physically quite large.
And then I get back onto the Manus, and it's like, return to Dathomir, and I was like, okay, that's definitely that's definitely the stopping point that he meant. Planning
a return trip, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that part threw me, but I decided not to question it. I was also questioning, like, you fight the flying big old creature twice, and I was like, I wonder if that counts as 2 or if that counts as 1.
Oh god. You know, there's a really easy way to confirm that. We have a
chat. I could have asked.
Any of the 75 messages we sent this week. Well, there's one thing for sure. This is the worst. This is a podcast with the worst communication on the internet. So we are just talking about Dathomir Part 1, and then we will bundle Ilum, the Return to Dathomir, and then the other thing next episode, and then we will play the final mission of the game and wrap up our coverage of Cal Kestis's Grand Adventure. Rye, would you do us the honors and read us the summary, please?
Let's see. All right, so the crew arrives on Dathomir, discovering a planet of crimson rock decorated in ancient glyphs. Wild vines and strange creatures appear to have reclaimed whatever civilization used to thrive here. Cal and BD1 are confronted by a Night Sister who warns him to leave. You want me to read the whole thing, or just go through it as we go through it?
Yeah, I mean, we can do the next paragraph, and then we'll break and talk about it.
I like how you put this. After murdering a few local Night Brothers, Cal finds a wanderer, or a wanderer in a robe.
You can't even tell I'm sick. A robed wanderer.
A robed wanderer who claims to be studying extinct cultures. The wanderer opines on the ancient nature of the runes, the Night Sister's demise, and a great power beneath the temple.
Excellent. So, the first thing I've got written in my notes here is Darth has once again self-reported his idiocy. What happened? As you will recall last time, my first note was Darth is an idiot and must explain what happened, and so here we are again. This could be a regular segment.
Yeah, as we've mentioned, we do have a text chat, and that was quite interesting. Keeping up with his progress.
Actually, yeah, we should. Okay, there's a few things that I want to clarify from a process perspective. So, like a lot of the long form study I've been doing, this is obviously not in any way. This isn't academic at all, but same form, I guess, like disciplinary wise, is we're playing through each section, and one of the hysterical things is that the guys have had 2 diametrically opposed experiences. Rye is like, this combat is trash, I hate it, I'm bad at it, seems to effortlessly breeze through the puzzles. And then Darth is just like, this corridor is confusing. It's like, I mean, I get it. Dathomir is a very, very strangely designed level, but it's just extremely funny every time that we break for a session. It's just like 2 weeks of Darth being like, I don't know where the fuck I'm going.
All right.
Where am I going? Why I'm lost again?
Keep that in your mind. I do have some comments on it, but like I would genuinely love to hear what happened to Darth.
Yeah, what happened?
So multiple things. There were multiple instances of that same thing where like I have no clue where I'm going, and then I would message David like 10 minutes later, and I'm like, okay, I figured it out, but I don't know what I did, and I couldn't replicate it for the life of me. But I found the cave I was supposed to be searching for, and I don't know how I did it. That happened multiple times. But to start off the level, I was like, okay, David's been playing this whole entire thing on like hero mode, and I've just been noobing it on story mode. And I feel like that's one reason I'm not as gripped by it. Doesn't feel challenging to me. And obviously it's not, because I'm playing on story mode. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to bump it up to hero mode. So I bump it up to hero, and the first thing that you fight is this little like demon doggy thingy. And it absolutely destroyed me time after time after time after time after time. And then I was like, okay, I can't do hero mode. I'm going to bump it down to the next level down, just like Jedi Knight or something. Destroyed me again and again and again. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to bump it down one more level to like Padawan. And it destroyed me again and again and again. And then I was like, okay, I'm a weakling. I have to do story mode. And that's when I realized, wait, I don't know any of the mechanics of this game. I literally don't know how to block and counterattack. I like in the game footage you see, like I'm not even locked onto him. Like
yeah, that's the main mechanic.
Yeah, the most basic fundamental mechanics of the gameplay I never learned because I was just like running through it, and I didn't have to learn them. So it's like impossible for me to play this game on any high level difficulty without completely relearning. So like when I realized that, like 30 minutes into the level, I just stopped and faced a couple Night Brothers and like relearned all the mechanics of how do you play this game. And so yeah, that's my stupid moment. It took me until like the last third of the game to realize, oh, these are the core mechanics of the game.
I literally, in our first recording session, I was like, you have to learn how to parry. You have to learn how to dodge. Roll the tape back. In the edit, you will hear me say it to you and you go, okay. No one listens to me anymore.
Well, it's funny because you said that in my mind at the time. I was thinking, no, you don't. I don't have to do any of that stuff, and I'm still getting past the levels.
I'm good, actually.
No, it was definitely episode 1 or episode 2. I think it was when we were talking about Kashyyyk, and I was complaining excessively about the combat and how that was that was the moment where I was like, no, I'm going to story mode. I don't care anymore. And you correctly described this as a parry-based game, which is what it is.
Yes, I mansplained Dark Souls to both of you. I think is what happened. Yes,
I also discovered dodging is a thing. Like, I knew you could dodge roll, and that's all I ever used, but then I was like, wait, if you just tap it once, then you nicely dodge their attack? Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, there's a whole separate mechanic built around
David
that.
have an aneurysm live on.
Slows time. It's... I guess you wouldn't realize that if you never locked on.
Darth, he's a sick man. That's a pity.
I mean, speaking of the slowing time thing, I also literally never use that function, even though I'm sure it's massively helpful.
I think it's a trash
I'd never
mechanic.
do it.
I don't use it. It's for cowards. It's for cowards. Slow time, more like easy mode. No thanks. It does.
Force push all the way.
My favorite one is the second you're like the force push and pull. You can like pick someone up, push them off a cliff, and then as they're like flying to their demise, pull them back, and just do that and torture them.
Oh, did you just say the second game?
No. Yeah, the second you get those powers. Yeah,
because I've tried that in this game and I haven't been able to do it.
Gotta have impeccable timing, Darth.
Apparently.
You gotta practice your torture. You're an apprentice Sith, okay? And it's a Sith master skill that you wouldn't. Have you heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Not from a Jedi.
Not from a Jedi. That wasn't a bad Palpatine on my own mouth. I've been deep in this. I should say something because we're on the other side of 2023. These will be coming out a little bit later, but I should explain something. Which is, I obviously am not a big... I was going to say I'm not a big Star Wars.
You can't say that anymore.
No.
I found a way to phrase it. I don't like Star Wars, but I am now so deep in the Star Wars well that I know more about it than most people. And partially to blame for that is A More Civilized Age, a Clone Wars podcast, which apparently was my top podcast last year, of which I was like the top 0.5% of listeners, which is an insane thing to learn about myself. Which means that, and I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of music. So what I learned in 2023 is that being around you guys for this number of years has ruined me. Because all I think about all the time is how bad Star Wars is. It's all I've ever I'm just like, I walk around and I'm like, you know, like this week I was like, oh man, like I can't believe they beefed the continuity with the Night Sisters and tried to fix it in that Ventress book that I read. What? What's happened to me? I used to be cool. Well, that was never true, but I used to know less about Star Wars. Okay, so Darth's an idiot. Acknowledged.
The thing I wanted to say about what you said is about how Darth's been struggling with things, and then I'm like breezing through stuff. Like that's not exactly true, but like for whatever reason, like I was the whole time going through Dathomir, I was thinking to myself like, this is like the best level. Like I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm going through there and I'm just like, I feel I should go that way, and that was the correct thing to do. And I just rolled through Dathomir. It was a pleasure cruise of a level. And I don't.
That's
but I
so
think
interesting.
Maybe that was because like I had been reading Darth's horror stories the whole time, and I was paying very close attention to everything. Like, all right. It's like, what do I do? This or do this? I think I should. But no, just naturally, I felt like I felt very compelled to go in a certain direction, and that usually ended up being correct.
I think from a level design perspective, it telegraphs. Here's what I would say: it telegraphs itself in ways that the rest of the game doesn't. So if you come into this level and you've never played the game before, it is quite obvious where to go. I think it's the issue it has is. It functions differently than every other level. So if you're like Darth and you've been struggling with everything else and you're focusing on all the cues the game is giving you in the other levels, which is things like which walls are runnable, which vines are jumpable, those are often the ways forward. This level is like the opposite, where those things are reusable and interchangeable, and they're not the path forward. So if you learn all the lessons from the rest of the game, you might end up confused in Dathomir, and then if you haven't been paying that much attention, you just follow the natural flow of the level, you'll be fine. So it's one of those, like, it feels like a real learning lesson for this dev team in their level design, where they take that lesson and they go, we can't have it both ways. We need to, like, align these two things, and then I think the rest of the game is definitely, as you would have experienced with Ilum, Rye, the rest of the game is very much, you always know where you're going. Like, they've figured it out. This feels like a big learning lesson for them. So yeah, I get where both of you are coming from, and I think those two perspectives are why the level doesn't work in the larger whole. But I tend to agree. I think it's the best level in the game, as far as, like, the most interesting to play through.
I will also say that we're going to save most of Ilum for the next time, but the opening part of Ilum really pissed me off. It was like, do you know how you climb the ice wall?
The climbing sequence, yeah.
So I climb the ice wall. I go up there. I'm at the top. I'm like, what is the point of being up here? There's like an echo that is meaningless, and I don't see what I'm supposed to be doing up here. And like, when I was running around, I got that little examine cue, and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing up here. But then I couldn't figure out where it was. When I was running, it popped up and then it disappeared. And I'm like, where was that spot? And then I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna kill myself. And so I jump off the cliff, but then I accidentally tagged the ice wall on the way down. So when I hit the bottom, I didn't die.
Incredible.
And then I climbed all the way back to the top, and then I looked down, and then I found the examine thing, and all it is him going, "That's a big blizzard."
Yeah, it's not a.
And then I looked down. I'm like, "Oh, you're supposed to go over there." God damn.
Yeah, the pretty obvious. Yeah, the pretty obvious thing once you see it. It does sometimes feel like there's some parts of this game just need a like BD1 where should I go button, I feel.
Yeah. Well, the
Sometimes you have
helpful.
that.
Yeah, but you have to really futz around.
Yeah, like sometimes when I've been so lost, the game is like, oh my gosh, this guy needs help, and then you can like keep hitting D, like down on the D-pad or something like that, and BD will start telling you stuff. But
Yeah.
every time I want it to do that, because I'm frustrated, it won't pop up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I believe there's an accessibility setting that lets you do that anytime. I could be wrong. I think there was something they added in the PS5.
I have a funny side note to show y'all from something that Rye just said, because somehow
boy.
I managed to do this.
Okay. This is for the audio listener. That's a clip of Darth has somehow glitched himself into spawning mid-death.
Yep.
After missing the easiest wall on the planet to grab onto.
Yep. Actually, that was what made me realize, oh wait, there's an auto toggle for climb. So when I turned that on in the settings, then I never missed that jump again.
Oh, we talked about this earlier. It's infuriating that isn't on by default. I don't understand what. There's never a scenario where you don't want to climb a wall you're jumping at. Ever. You always want to climb it. It's like, it's one of those like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to justify their decision making there, but it's fucking unhinged.
Does it conflict with you like falling? Because like when I was descending the ice wall, I want to be grabbing it at various points, but like I'm trying to get down it quickly, so I'm just drop, grab. You know what I mean?
It might do, but I feel like they could have sold that the Assassin's Creed way, where if you hold like the drop button, they just don't grab anything. Like you do it the other way around.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know what puzzle he's stuck on here. Oh, you don't know what to do with this thing.
No. So sorry, I'd asked. There were multiple things that I had like messed around with, and this was one of them that I found that you could use the Force to throw yourself up on the door, and it would, I don't know where the clip starts, and it would fling you up into the air, and then you could get up on all these like little crevices that you weren't supposed to get up on, just because the force of it throws you up in the air. And so I stayed here for a while just using the Force to throw myself up in the air over. And so every time I found one of these things, I was doing that and seeing where it would let me fling myself up to.
So it's becoming apparent why it takes you 5 hours to play every level, because you discover one physics mechanic and you're like, ooh.
Or he refuses to do what the game tells him to do. It's like, we need to go towards the beach. No, I'm going that way.
Go here. Yeah, I'm gonna see what's up. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna swim the other direction for as long as I can.
That was actually literally the end of the level too. Like you come to the temple and the door is smack in front of you, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to the right. I want to see what's to the right. So I went to the right, and then it's a whole side mission that takes you to a secret chest, which I wasn't expecting. I just wanted to see what was over there. But I thought I was lost because you like go way down underneath and all this other stuff. And I was like, I shouldn't have done this. I should have just gone through the door.
Well, it's too late now. Okay, so a few things I definitely want to talk about. I definitely want to talk about, okay. Cal, so Cal, they arrive on this planet, and Cal's like, you know what I need to do? I need to go and I need to get the location of this holocron. You know how I need to do that? Is by slaying the indigenous population. The Night Sister, you come up and she's like, hey, could you leave though? And Cal's like, I'm a good guy. And she's like, fine, and you will die like a good guy. And you just kill a bunch of Dathomirian Knight brothers, who are the same models functionally as stormtroopers, as far as like combat is concerned. But like, killing stormtroopers feels fine because they're space Nazis. This felt bad to me this time. Like, I don't know. I think just after Andor, I was like, I was far more conscious of some of the politics Star Wars does, and especially after Clone Wars and the Ventress book, I was like, this feels wrong. You just kill a bunch of them, and like, yeah, they're yelling at you and whatnot, but like, you're invading their fucking land. Like, you're an invader and they're defending their home, and you're just like, just cutting these guys up. Like, it was a I think as far as the way that the game wants you to think about stuff and the way it's presented, I thought it was interesting that they sort of, when you kill them, I'm not sure what that, like, but the magic or whatever you want to call it, you know, they kind of magic away. They're not just like corpses or whatever. I just think there's like some interesting decision making here happening to make it feel less like you're coming in and slaughtering an indigenous population.
I think, I mean, a pretty easy fix for that would have been if they had just had, you're not attacking them. Like, she tries to sick them on you, but you're not actively going against any of the Night Brothers that you come across when you're in their village or whatever. So, and granted, the game is not really built this way. I know other games are, but if you just don't attack them, then they stay neutral and just let you pass even though they don't like it. But as soon as you attack one of them, then all of them are now your enemy. Like, that mechanic would make a whole lot of sense for this level and make it feel way less like murdering the Native Americans kind of thing.
Well,
yeah.
I definitely had that thought that you had, David, but I was like, we're in their space, man. And it was like, all right, like, I'm thinking a little bit about like what Darth was saying there. I think the issue is that you come onto their planet and you're like, hey, I'm gonna barge around into the y'all's space looking for this thing, and I'm going to crash through the gate of the village that you definitely don't want me to go into, and then kill everybody there on my way to some ruins. And it was just, are we the bad guys?
Oh my god, guys, are we bad? Is this wrong?
Baddies? Yeah.
Yes, probably.
Do you know, I was when the Night Sister shows up and she like drops her dead sisters on you, right? I felt like was being set up. I had the feel of a boss battle to it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the lead into it, and she's like, "And here's my dead sisters," and like it comes out of the cutscene, and I just force blasted them off a cliff. Or actually, I don't remember if I force blasted them off a cliff, but I hit him with the force blast, and they all died. And I was like,
"Oh,
well,
that probably made it less." Yeah. Okay. That took me like an hour. The second they touch you on that hardest difficulty, you're dead. That was just like, yeah.
That was actually a note that I had as well for them, that I wish that they had, like, from a villain story structure perspective, like if they had saved that until the very end, so you don't see all the reincarnated sisters until the end of the level when she like raises every sister on the planet to come after you at once. Like, if that was the reveal that they exist at all, I think it would have been much more powerful, because like Ryan said, yeah, on a harder level it would have been more challenging, but there were also only like 2 or 3 of them or something. It wasn't as powerful as like, oh, zombies exist and there's 1,000 of them.
No, that's right. That's the repeat beat that David hates.
Yeah, that's the double beat. I mean, the other thing you could have, yes, it is. It's, as Dan Harmon would say, no double beats. I think the other thing that you could do there is you could go the Metal Gear Solid route, and you could have her raise all of the Dathomirians that you've killed to get there, and they could come after you all at once.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that would have been like, it would be hard to do because they're quite generic, so you may not necessarily like pick that up, but I think that would, if she said, hey, here is everyone you've killed and they're coming, this is your karma or whatever. It is, where do you guys think, okay, I'm trying to think of a way to ask, by the way, this episode, we'll talk about it in the next little chunk, but we're about to learn the thing, which I don't want to spoil here until we get to it. We're about to learn the thing, which means you can start Googling stuff now. Because there's 2 things that happen that every wiki spoils. It's ridiculous. Anyway, one thing I did want to say is, like, this character, I think this character of the Night Sister is interesting in the same way that Ventress is interesting, because it is rare. Wow, it's extraordinarily rare in the main canon, to the point where it doesn't really exist outside of the cartoons or the books, but it's very, very rare for us to come across Force users that aren't part of the kind of dyad that we're used to, right? The Sith and the Jedi, right? The light and the dark. The Night Sisters have control of the Dathomirian magic, which we're led to believe is some version of Force something. It's kind of unclear. I think in the broader current canon, obviously the extended universe has a bunch of answers, but I think it's interesting that in this game, in the what has been so far the relatively this is where it's tricky. The relatively grounded context of the Empire era. I think it's interesting that we get Dathomir here and we get the Night Sisters doing magic and stuff. Obviously, it affords some great gameplay mechanics, but I just think from a genre perspective, it makes this feel a little bit more science fantasy than it does hard science fiction, which is certainly what it felt like to me before Kashyyyk. I think after Kashyyyk with the big bird, we definitely entered like science fantasy as a genre, but I think this is them definitely moving much more toward science fantasy, and then they're just going to continue that with the series, which is especially there's a book that happens between this game and the next one, and that very much is playing in the same space. But certainly the Night Sisters represent some kind of a genre switch. I'm interested, like, did you guys find that noteworthy, or are you so Star Wars that you're like, oh yeah, that's just the Night Sisters? Like, did that clock on the radar?
I would say no.
I mean, I don't. Go ahead, Ryan. Finish.
I was gonna say I would say no, just because I think maybe that was a feeling that I had back in the Clone Wars. But I definitely do appreciate the feeling that you're talking about of, here is a force that, or that's I guess that is the right word to use. Here is a force that doesn't fit into the force paradigm that we're used to, and like that was very interesting. Like Ventress was one of the most interesting characters on that show.
Yeah, and then
the whole. Well, no, that's a different sort of topic. But yeah, no, in this game, no, that didn't really come up as a thought for me, and I think that's probably because of my earlier exposure to the Night Sisters.
It was either in like early on in this level, or in watching Clone Wars that I did a very little bit of research and was just like, oh, okay, so the witches they access the Force, they learned to access it in a different way from both the Jedi and the Sith, which makes sense. And then after that, I didn't really care about thinking more about it because it's a different way of using the same power. And then when you really look at like all of the stuff they do, it's all of the same stuff that the Jedi or the Sith do. It's just presented differently. Like Mother, what's her name? Talzin. Like she lives on after death, just like the Force ghosts. They can jump into other people's bodies and possess them, which is the same thing as Obi-Wan saying these aren't the droids you're looking for. It's like the same idea, but it's presented as spell casting and all this other stuff. So, I mean, once you click that it's kind of the same thing, they just went along different evolutionary lines. It's pretty interesting.
Now, one other thing that I would say is I don't know what compelled me to, maybe because I was actually enjoying this one, but like I read some of the lore bits that BD1 picks up all over the place. Actually, no, I read all of them on Dathomir, but I was not familiar with the idea that it was the Night Sisters that ran the planet, or basically they were the ruling class, and then they had like basically all the men were like serving them.
You get that in Clone Wars in the episode where you introduce Savage.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in that one I got the feeling that like they were sort of separate, but it was in this in the lore bits that you get from BD1, like it's very specific about like like the Night Brothers serve the Night Sisters, and the Night Sisters rule everything.
Yeah, because I guess because they have access to the magic. Right, there's something in the same way that some aspect of the Force is inherited. It seems like in their race, culture, ethnicity, that like largely the power is, for whatever reason, gendered. Like females happen to have access to the magic in the way that people that are born male don't. And so like there's something happening there as well. Make of that
Something
what I
else
think.
that-
Yeah, I mean, you do have Maul, and
Yeah, but they're the exception. Like with Savage,
Well,
like they're the
also-
exceptions,
no,
right?
but Savage specifically is infused with the Force, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's like bred to be a weapon, basically.
So I don't know if the same thing happened with Maul, or he's just naturally gifted or whatever. I don't remember his origin story for Palpatine.
Not sure.
Yeah, he supposedly was like bought at a young age by Palpatine to like raise up, and he like raised him from a 5-year-old or something like that. So he must have presented strongly in the Force from that young age.
I mean, I guess that's also the question of. I mean, I guess culturally that's interesting, right? Maybe it's not that one gender at birth has a stronger connection to the Force, but rather like the culture says, hey, if you're born a female, then we're going to teach
train
you
you.
all of this magic. Yeah, and if you're born a male, you're here to serve. You know, that's also
you go
interesting.
fight in the arena and prove yourself.
Yeah, you do punchies, drink beer, etc., and so forth. Football, you get it, men's stuff. It does have some of that happening, I think.
No, it's an interesting control or political control mechanic that you would. It's one of those things like we talk about how like you extrapolate an idea of what you would expect to see, and that is what you would expect to see. That the ruling class controls. They have the access to the magic, and they're going to control who gets access to the magic. So
yeah,
remember, because everybody now has access to the Force, according to I think it was Dave Filoni. We talked about that like last time or the time before. But yeah, just them controlling who gets major access to that is their way of staying in power.
Which I think is interesting when you put it in conversation with the Clone Wars era and the ways in which Lucas is thinking about Bush era politics and the ways in which the military-industrial complex becomes an allegory for the means of production. And so if you go, okay, if one ruling class, if everyone has some access to means of production, which is to say everyone has some level of ability to do labor that produces value, then who controls who gets to do the most amount and who gets to benefit the most amount is who is in charge. And so in this society, it seems like the Night Sisters have the most means of access to the means of production, and they can kind of restrict and control which Night Brothers get trained properly, which just become enlabored, etc., and so forth. And I think this is where like Star Wars as a, I think particularly in that early 2000s mode, refracting off of the original series, I think that's where it gets really, really interesting for me, because this game isn't about any of that really. Some of it is there with the Night Sister and where some of that goes, but like this is just like this is what I was saying before, like unquestioningly you walk in, you kill these Night Brothers because they're sort of under her control, or you're trespassing, however you want to think about it. But the crucial thing there is like it doesn't seem like they have any say in the outcome. Like it doesn't feel like what Darth said before, where you could walk in and if you don't attack them, they don't attack you. That just doesn't feel like a gear that this game is possible to shift into. It doesn't seem like it has that speed in it yet. Like they haven't figured out what are the other verbs that exist other than kill. They haven't got there yet. And I think it is I mean, it's just like, it's the genre of game, right? It's you're either killing or you're solving a puzzle. They haven't figured out other verbs yet. And this feels like the moment where I think this game could have gone from like pretty good to like, this is really going for something if they'd found some other gear they could shift into. And obviously being AAA, under EA, all these other things, there's all these obligations. I mean, that's not necessarily something they could do, but I mean, a similar gear would be what I suggested before, right? If she summons all the dead people you've killed, like there is some other there's some other mode they could have moved into here in some way to bring some of this forward in a way that doesn't end up happening.
If this was Baldur's Gate 3, that would be an option, you know?
Oh, yeah.
There would be a way to do... There'd be a way to do that.
Team up with the Night Brothers.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that,
overthrow the Night Sisters.
That karma mechanic is just a brilliant idea, because like if let's say you killed one guy in the whole level, and she's like, and now you reap the karma that you've sowed, and it's like one guy shows up and he's like,
Well, that's you guys probably haven't played it, but at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, you walk through a swamp and it's everyone that you've killed, and in the game you don't have to kill anyone. You can do the whole game non-lethally. And so all of the times you're like, it'll just be quicker if I just ace this dude. I'll just one to the back of the head with my silenced pistol. And then you walk through this like eerie graveyard of like the 50 people that you killed that you didn't have to. As someone is like, you said you were the good guy. Like what are you doing? Like, this isn't how good people act. And you're like, oh fuck. Like it and it hits you in a real way. Like, it was the first time like a video game, it was for me one of those formative moments in the same way that the end of Halo 2 was. It was one of those formative moments for me where I was like, oh, this art, like this as a medium, this art form has a particular thing it can do that nothing else can, which is it can take the stuff you've done and it can be like, here, you were complicit. What do you think about that? And it just hits you in a very different way. And this game just isn't, yeah, you're right. It's just not operating in that space. And it doesn't have to. It's a turn your brain off blockbuster game. But I think these things are interesting to bring forward in discussion, because they are the best parts of Star Wars, in my opinion.
I'm just picturing all like the innocent dogs showing up with their ghosts. Like, why did you shoot me? I'm just a dog.
All of the fucking animals that Cal slaughters in this game. Oh my god. All little weird rats and shit. Yeah.
See, my swamp wouldn't be that bad because I just run by everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Rise would be the coward ending, where they're like, couldn't face your destiny, huh? Fled from everything.
Except for those those two stormtroopers that I blasted off a cliff, you know.
So back to the Night Sisters, because I had a question that really confused me, because she says it's the Jedi's fault. They're the ones that wiped us out, which isn't true.
Explain yourself.
People can be wrong about stuff.
So is this like, did the hobo dude, the other ex-Jedi, whatever his name was, did he just like lie to her? Did she never know the truth? What made her think the Jedi were the ones who wiped them out? Did they go into any of that?
Was it
yes.
in this? Wasn't it in the Clone Wars? Wasn't it?
It was Dooku.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was Dooku and the Separatists that came and did it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Ryan, do you want to read the rest of the summary here, and that'll be a good lead in to me to try to explain to Darth.
Okay. Let's see. Navigating a hidden village under the surface, Cal is confronted by Gorgara, a rather large and hostile bat. Owl bat, was how I would describe it. Tussling through many ruins, Cal eventually sets the beast away. Then, in a flashback, Cal experiences a warped vision of Order 66, where his mentor batters him, breaking his lightsaber in real life, somehow. You want the rest of it, too?
Yeah, go on.
On the way back to the Mantis, Cal runs into the Wanderer, who reveals himself to be Terran Malikos, yet another fallen Jedi. The Night Sister, frustrated with Terran's betrayal, chases Cal off-planet with zombies. Back on the Mantis, the crew decides to head to the Jedi Temple on Ilum to repair Cal's weapon.
So, this old guy who was really creepy turns out to be not a good guy. Shocker. So to explain your question, Darth, my estimation is that Terran, as a former Jedi, manipulates the Night Sister into thinking, or it misapprehends what happened, or however you want to think about it. There is some aspect of his perception which is duplicitous that he has passed on to the Night Sister, and that is why she thinks the Jedi did this, right? He is in the ways in which he has twisted his perception, and also he's right. Like, the Jedi made Dooku, right? The Jedi made this guy and constructed an order such that he was able to walk away and go and do these other things. So like, it's one of those things where she's not literally right in that the Jedi did this to Dathomir, but also she is right because the Jedi enabled this to happen, and the Jedi didn't stop this from happening. And that's one of those like nitty gritty, subjective life experience media crit things where it's like, depending on how you view the culpability of the Jedi as functionaries of the Galactic Senate and as this like monastic order of enforcers, the extent to which you view them as culpable for raising these warriors capable of these incredible feats of magic and strength and violence, and not being able to control them or the mechanics under which the order functions, necessarily ejecting people that don't completely adhere to their like homogenous requirements. To the extent that you blame the Jedi for that, I think will inform the extent to which you agree with this criticism that the Jedi did this, or you can view it as Terran, I guess, lying to her, or passing on his dark side misapprehension of what happened. But I mean, I personally think he's right. Like, they didn't literally do it, but they are responsible for this, right? They made Dooku.
I really want to fight with that, but that's going to be a very long discussion, I think. So we'll have
Look,
to
your mileage is it's going to be a purely, your mileage is going to vary. So it's just purely subjectivity. Like, well, that's just where I'm at with my politics. That's all. Like it's I'm not right. It's just what I think.
Well, what I was going to say is like there's two different ways. So that if you are, we're talking about the Night Sister's statement, right? Not Terran.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Darth, I believe, if I remember correctly from the years of discussions we've had, you like to very much take the literal meaning of what somebody's saying or what a character is saying on screen. But there's two different ways that I could or did read this. So the first one was the sort of the indirect responsibility that David's talking about. And then the second one is that she's just wrong. And there's a difference between being wrong and being dishonest, because, you know, that may be her truth. She can still be wrong and it can still be it can still be true to her. So if she doesn't really know what happened, but she thinks the Jedi are responsible, that motivates her character correctly for how this plays out.
Yeah, it was exactly my point. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that, the future part of her story structure, because like I know we're supposed to come back to Dathomir, so maybe all of this will happen, but like she is normally this character would be told, would somehow figure out, oh, I've been lied to, I've been wrong, and then they would team up with the hero to go defeat the big bad down the line. Like normally that's how this would happen, and like that didn't occur. So I'm like, what am I missing? And then it didn't click. Oh, you might come back. You might get that story later down the road.
Yeah. That's the next bit we're going to play, basically.
Okay, so forget everything I said in the past 15 minutes. There was a complaint that was...
what I would say is, like, the second game is largely concerned with everything you just talked about. Like, this is so hard to do without spoiling anything, but, like, these questions that I'm raising around, like, was the Jedi Order good or not, becomes the central question of the second story. And like, what are the throughputs of the rigid homogenous structures that the Jedi enforce in order to become the institution they are? And what does that mean for the people like this Night Sister on the peripheries of those, like, kind of, if you like, catching strays in that shootout between the Jedi and the Sith, right? Like, what does it mean for the galaxy that there is the possibility of people catching strays? And this is someone caught in those strays, right? Like, she presumably gets lied to, does a bunch of shit that she's going to regret because of this. Because Terran is just, like, he's straight up wrong, because he's warped by the things that have happened to him as a result of the Jedi Order and Order 66. Like, he's a character who doesn't have access to the same information we do, because he didn't see that the Emperor was a Sith. From his perspective, as he tells you, he's like, my guys just turned on me. Like, the Jedi tried to, like, in his head, he's like, they tried to fucking kill me. Not realizing, of course, that it's the other way around. But I think that's, like, that's the dramatic irony there, is that we know better than he does. And exactly what you're saying, Darth, we know better than she does as well, if you're well-versed in your Star Wars lore. And so I think it produces some pretty interesting questions that if we'd played all of this in one chunk, you would have the answers to, but I didn't want to because it's a lot of gameplay. And I'm really worried about the next part of Dathomir for both of you from a skill perspective. But if you learn to lock on, we might be fine. We might be.
Well, okay. don't forget, I'm still in story mode. So.
Oh,
and Riley, he'll just run past
mode,
everything.
So. Yeah, well, the Gagaru, the owl bat thing. Like that fight was the first part of it, at least, where you beat on them until they leave. Was like I thought it was pretty comical, in that like I walk up and I'm just like against his knee, for like and he's just looking at me. Like,
he just stares down at you.
Down there? And then occasionally, like, and then he's like, all right, well, then he like stabs his hook in the ground, and then he does like a couple charges and flies up and blasts the ground a little bit. And I'm taking like no damage from any of this because I'm on story mode, and then I walk up and it was kind of ridiculous. That I think if I were a game designer and I had something on story mode, like I would redo how that works. Like I would greatly reduce their health. I would keep the damage still pretty high, but I would keep I wouldn't. Don't make me beat on it like that. It was
you can
boring.
do so. This game has sliders that you can adjust on the difficulty, so you can be like damage stays the same, but my health is really high and their health is really like you can tweak that all yourself if you want. It's real fiddly though.
Okay.
This was not my experience with this boss fight. This was the most dramatic shit you've ever seen in your. This was like life or death shit for me, where it was like every time he moved, I was like parry. I was on one when I was playing this boss fight. This was so fucking hard because he has this little move he does where he digs one claw in and then he wiggles forward like he's going to attack, and it's a fake out. And I would go to parry and then he just boop. He just bopped me, and one bop was enough to kill me most of the time. If I wasn't on completely full health, that one bop would kill me. So this was an intense one for me, and also I think just like a weird boss for this area. Like I not to be like backseat game designer or whatever, but like I don't. If this level is us going through and killing a bunch of indigenous people, why is the boss fight not also in conversation with that? Like we just kill a big owl guy, a big owl bat thing. It just feels like a missed opportunity there.
All the flying stuff was Kashyyyk. So it didn't fit within like the, I don't know, like genre of the world that we were in.
Yeah.
Although I loved it. Like, yeah, the first half in the cave felt so stupid, even though I loved the lighting and all the stuff like that. Like, it was gorgeous. But when you got outside and you're like flying through the air and trying to cling to its back, I kept dying on purpose just so I could be skydiving around.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool.
Such a Darth thing to do.
I feel like the way that I budget my time for stuff that I have to play or watch for coverage is I'm like, okay, like for example, this week I need to rewatch the Doctor Who specials and I need to watch 2 episodes of Daredevil, and I'm like, okay, Monday night this, Tuesday night that, Wednesday night this, and Darth is like 7 hours. I'm gonna do fun physics. Living very different. I feel like you have far more fun than I do. Yeah, it is. That second half is actually kind of dope. I like those big, like extended sequences, the big flashy dramatic stuff. I think it's where the game shines the most, for me.
I found as far as like the boss himself, like I think it is a bit of lore building. Again, if you read the BD1 notes about how that was how the Knight brothers proved themselves by fighting this thing, and then of course you have like the dead guy in there. Quick note on that. did anybody else think it was weird when like he just walks up and starts molesting this dead guy on the ground?
Yeah,
maybe that's the wrong word.
But...
I like that was the word that came to me because I'm like, there's a guy that's like he's lying there dead against the wall, and Cal just comes up and starts yanking his arm. Like,
yeah, I thought he was the dude was alive, and he was like, oh, let me save this guy because he's stuck in the owl cave and I don't want him to get eaten.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was the logical thing, and then no, he was trying to loot the body.
Yeah.
Like,
loot that body.
I mean, if you think about it, this game is just Tomb Raider. It's just Cal going into a bunch of ruins and being like, let me have all your stuff.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's pretty on brand.
Yeah, and by the way, the climbing things, oh, yeah, best gear piece ever.
Oh, the little glove things? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
although he looks so dorky when he's scampering up the wall.
So stupid. Little spider guy.
If I
ridiculous.
didn't have those for the ice wall on Elam, that would have been so much worse.
I mean, you can't do it without the
Well, I
gloves.
mean, but if it was like a normal, like if he was climbing still at the speed that he was before, that would have been painful.
It feels like they were like, oh, this mechanic is running too long in the tooth. Let's fix it. Which makes you go, guys, maybe you needed to tweak the mechanic. Maybe this wasn't like, I don't know. Anytime a game is like, do the thing but quicker, it's like feels like you should have thought about it more then maybe.
Or
Like,
made a new
doing
thing.
it quicker is not a good remedy.
So, David, I need to break your brain really quickly, although I've already done that twice so far this recording.
Remember, he's
but
not a well man.
Yeah. Do I want to hear
So-
this?
You just joked about 7 hours of playtime for me budgeting.
Oh, no.
I just added it up from all of the recordings that I've taken, so I know all of the days that I played. 6 different days it took me to go through this level, and I bet at least each day that I played was at least an hour of playtime. So at minimum, 6 hours to go through this level that we're talking about.
On Dathomir?
Bare minimum. Bare minimum.
What the fuck? I think I did it in one sitting in an hour while I was stoned. Like,
On hero mode.
I think, yeah,
While I'm
on the
stoned on
hardest
hero.
difficulty. I think what I did was I know exactly how it happened, which is I did my Daredevil watch. This was in December. I did my Daredevil for our last episode last year. And then I had a couple beers and I smoked a joint, and then I was like, oh, hey, let's do some Star Wars. And I just sat down and I was like hyper focus mode, like one sitting. That's incredible. It took you 6 hours? Jesus. I don't know if we can do the second game because it'll take you 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Well, do you remember we were also debating on watching him do Elam live before this because we started recording a little bit early.
Yeah. With what time? We'll be here for like 5 hours. Jeez.
Yeah. Which a bunch of that is like goofing around and doing funny mechanic stuff.
Yeah.
If there is a pot on screen, I destroy it. No pot has lived past my going around it, and you're not even look like you know the pots are destroyable, but so everything that's destroyable gets destroyed. That is a rule for me.
I think we figured that out when you had the clip of you needlessly chopping spears in half for
Yep.
like 30 seconds.
But now I've unlocked the double arm force push, so now I can destroy a whole room of pots in one go.
Wait till, well, if you'd finish Ilum, you'd have the thing which lets you do even more shit like that. Let me tell you. You get a big area of effect attack.
Well, 3 hours from now, I will.
Yeah. In 10 hours when you finish Ilum. It's the shortest. I was like, it's 30 minutes. It'll be fine. I'm worried.
I was
I'm
like,
worried.
no, it's not.
It really is. Chuck finished it between the time it took him to message us for me to message back, which was like maybe 2 hours, and he finished it. So,
I could go wait if I get in the right mindset, because I play like campaign games in the exploration mindset, where like I am playing it to like find the chest or find the hidden skull or whatever Halo or Destiny game you want to talk about. Like the mission is a side quest to the main quest of finding what secrets the developers hid on the level. So I'm running around trying to find everything first before I'm even looking at the objective that's blinking right there in front of me. So if I completely swap how I play these games, yeah, I could go way faster. It's just
listen, follow your process. Like, do your own little, do your thing. Like, I ain't trying to shame you. It's just like, couldn't be me.
But I also want to play more of these games because I've never really played a whole lot of campaigns, and now I'm like, oh, they're really, really fun. I need to get out of my multiplayer mindset and do some of this stuff.
Play
but I don't want them to take
games.
Yeah, but it can't take me 50 hours to complete, so I have to change how I game.
see, Darth has the mindset of that. I really like it because there's a lot of times where like I'll be like running through a game and everything, and I forget where this happened to me most. We were playing Ready or Not, which is a SWAT game or whatever, and they recently like did an update patch and everything, and we're going through there, and like somebody was like, look at this, look what they did to this room, and you go in there, like the amount of work, they're like some developer or some game developer, this is probably like a week's worth of work that they spent making remaking this room. Let's just stop here. There's bad guys in the room next over, but they can wait. Like, let's just stop here and admire the work that this guy did here.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You, Darth, it would take you, like David was talking about doing the Assassin's Creed thing, it would take you a decade to get through Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Easily.
Yeah, I'm very... I think we'll be fine until AC4. That's when I think it's going to become a problem. But yes, there are... Valhalla would take you 20 years. That game is way too much stuff there.
I don't think so. Like Valhalla is the amount. Like, well, I mean, I need to go back and play it because I bought it brand new, and there's probably been a bunch of updates to it. But like,
yeah, there's
Odyssey,
stuff.
You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting something interesting to do. There was so much in that game. Like Darth talks about the main campaign being a side quest. I'm like, I was on like down in Crete, and I'm like, I don't even remember what we were supposed to be doing right now. Like I'm off doing something like fighting like the Minotaur or whatever.
I mean, they're chasing Witcher 3, right? Which is a game where you're riding a horse through like the middle of nowhere, and someone's like, "Hey, do you have a sec?" And you're like, "Yeah, what's up?" And then it's like 75 hours later, and you're like on a different continent because of this one dude that you talk to. Like, that game is like, I mean, to an extent, Baldur's Gate 2 is a bit like that as well, but it definitely has that a priori, like, no one thing becomes your priority because you're just sort of naturally flowing through whatever is like taking your attention. The second in this series, there's an area that is like that you could probably spend 100 hours in. So if we ever cover that, I'll have to find a way to structure that sensibly so we don't lose Darth for like 2 months.
It's just so funny that Rye had that same experience talking about that room that you went in, because I want to say it was Destiny 2, like even in the beta when I was playing something, and like I had climbed up into the rafters on a building, and I was like looking at the underneath of the substrate. I was like, look at this here, look how amazing this detail is, and everyone was like, dude, what are you doing? The boss is this way. And I'm like, yeah, but someone built this. Like some developer had to build this little nut that I'm looking at right here, and this bolt right here. Look at the detail on that. Like it almost hurts me for everyone to ignore all of these tiny, beautiful details that some poor person worked to create, you know?
Bringing it back to what we're actually talking about. There was a moment where I got up very high. Like, there's another thing that I thought was very interesting about this particular level was it felt very vertical, the whole thing. And there was where I was up very high, looking out back towards the Manus or whatever. And I was like, I stopped there and I like spent like a few minutes just looking around. I'm like, this is really, they did a really good job with this planet, I thought. Just the aesthetics of it. Never mind the level design, which I thought was pretty good. But like the aesthetics of it, I also thought were excellent.
It is the strongest visual level, I think. Like, well, I mean, Ilum's pretty good, and then the final level's pretty okay. It's the third best level, but
I don't know.
the third best level
Ilum's
out of the
just
last.
white. But
yeah, but it's a change of pace for me.
Kashyyyk is the first planet is probably the worst, I would say.
Definitely. Well, the Zepho.
Yeah, it's like chalky, grassy cliffs with the.
Yeah, because the fucking scrapyard planet rules, and then you go to this weird grassy thing, and it's like, okay, all right. Yeah, it's definitely the weakest. One thing I was gonna say, Darth, just on that note, is you definitely need to get into like CRPGs, like computer role-playing games, because they are specifically designed around making you make decisions that make you miss content, as a way of like forking decisions. So there are entire like cool, incredible quest developers have put in that you miss because of choices that you made, and then you go back and you play as a different character and you make different choices and you have like a whole different experience.
We could drag him through Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's Gate 3, pretty much any BioWare RPG, the original Fallout New Vegas, like just there's a whole we got a whole array.
I'm saying we could drag him through Baldur's Gate.
Oh, we could
3.
literally, physically push him through it. Yes. Strength 18. Let me push my boy.
Because you can replace the NPC characters in your party with actual people.
It's true. Yeah, you do the multiplayer.
One step above NPC. Yep, that's me.
Well, not above. You're on the same level in that case.
Okay.
You technically are an NPC.
Well, the thing about the only issue with replacing the NPC characters for you, if that was your first time playing it, is that the NPC characters are really good. So
yeah, they're so good.
You would be missing out if that was your first game.
Oh my god, we should make Darth play the Dark Urge. That'd be so good.
That was something that was really eye-opening to me, because about how much freedom you have in that game, because I was talking with one of my friends at work, and he was like, oh yeah, you know, you can side with the goblins. And I'm like, wait, what? I was like, I didn't think that was an actual choice. Like, the goblins are
no
like,
human would make that choice.
Yes.
It's like, would you like to slaughter a refugee encampment? Yes or no? And people are like, I'm good actually. But then you do your evil run through and you're like,
let's do it.
Yeah, I'll do it. And then your reward is you get to fuck the sexy drow. Yeah. Like, it's all the way dark-sided. It's fucking awesome. But yeah, I did that as the Dark Urge. And I made some questionable choices. That character basically lets you do all the shit that the main game doesn't, where it's like, hey, you met this person. You just want to kill him? I'm like, yeah, I kind of just want to kill him. It's great. We can't, that's a whole different podcast.
As a segue to get us back on point, because you were just talking about like freedom of exploration, which like quite literally that's something that bugged me in this one, was the amount of places that looked like you were physically able to go but you couldn't kept confusing me. And that was another reason that I like, it just didn't seem obvious to my brain, which is so linear, of like where you're supposed to go, because like you could slip through any passage that looks like this, you could crawl through, right? So there's all of these gaps and tree roots and all of this stuff, and it looks like, oh yeah, I could probably go through that. But then you get up there and you're bumping into the wall and you're like, oh, I guess I can't go through that. And it wasn't just this level. There are other levels that have had that same issue. But I just noticed it way more here for some reason. And I kind of wish that they had done something different with that mechanic, where I don't know if, I mean, I guess it's usually pretty obvious because they have like outlined like 2x4s straight down to indicate this is something you could crawl through. But like from a realism standpoint, it just bugs me to have gaps that are the same exact width, and oh no, I can't fit through that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a casualty of platforming, I think. I mean, other games since have finessed that a little bit more. The first Doom remake, basically, like, really subtly, if a ledge is climbable, there will be light near it, and you just like start to intuit what's climbable. Control does a really good job of that as well, where particularly toward the later game, things that where you're supposed to go will subtly have some kind of yellow color on them. I have good news, which is the second game fixes that problem. They find some really elegant ways. But yeah, it is definitely I can see why you got lost, is what I'm saying.
I have two different things that I wanted to talk about. The first one, this will be I guess a relatively quick thing, would be I had the thought while I was in this level, like, keep in mind, I did say that I felt that I got through this level pretty easily, but I was thinking to myself at one point in there, like, would I enjoy this game more if it was more on rails, as opposed to like this huge open world of well, you could go that way or you could go that way, but like, you're trying to get over here, but how I get over there isn't necessarily clear to me, and there is a bit of trial and error in getting over there. Would I enjoy it if it was more on rails? You know what I mean? Like, think Uncharted 2. That's probably the best comparison, because there's not, you have a fairly wide path, but it keeps narrowing, and you are sort of it's very clear how you get forward, and then you run into a puzzle that you have to solve, and then you progress past that and you keep moving. Do you know, like,
yeah.
Darth, have you played Uncharted 2?
A bunch of these I've watched either brother or roommates play. So I've seen a little bit of gameplay, a little bit of the puzzle solving.
If you enjoy this at all, I would highly encourage you to play Uncharted 2.
I would like to play it just from because it's like the vibe is something I really enjoy. Anything that has to do with like old ruins and that kind of stuff, and exploring old abandoned places. Like, I adore those kind of stories.
Have you met The Last of Us? Can I introduce you to The Last of Us?
I adored the show. I've
gotta play.
I think
the
we have
games.
a bunch of.
I couldn't get through.
Yeah, we have a bunch of stuff in the chat about that.
I couldn't get through.
Or the game?
No, the game. I didn't. The show I got through, yeah, but the game I didn't. Yeah. I got to somewhere in the city with clickers, and it was just
I have a lot of. I've said this on so many podcasts, so I'll keep this brief. But that game, or those two games, are the most interesting games to talk about because they are so well praised and so deeply interestingly flawed. Yeah, they're fascinating. They make for really, really, really good podcast content, which is why me and Danielle have talked about. I think we have like 20 hours of podcasts now or something like that, just about The Last of Us as a topic. So do with that what you will.
Well, for my original question, what is your feeling on that? Like, would you prefer this better as an on-rails experience, or more of an Uncharted level layout, or do you like it the way that it is?
I think the mechanics they built in this game are stronger in the linear sections. I think this would be a better game if the levels were more linear and then they had one or two play spaces that were open. It feels like they're chasing Dark Souls 1 in a way that they just can't achieve here. I think I'd prefer it if they went down the Naughty Dog route, like Uncharted, and kind of have the corridors that are all that you can't really get lost in, and then have a few open play spaces. I think would be my preference.
I mean, I had said that same basic thing pretty early on, that I would have loved it a lot more if it were less confusing as to which way to go to complete the mission, because you lose track of so much of the story if you end up wandering in circles trying to figure out where you are, and then you just wind up being frustrated because, oh, it's right there, you're an idiot, and now you're angry at yourself, and what am I doing again? I don't remember. Looking for a little list of children, apparently, which
yes,
they've all forgotten about because we're looking for a doodad that the Zepho had.
You reminded me of something. I had a thought somewhere within this episode about the MacGuffin that we're chasing is this list of kids, right? Which is kind of creepy, but whatever.
Classic.
But I think we brought it up.
You've never invaded an indigenous population and slaughtered them to find a list of children?
Can't say that. Well, I'm not until today, but like.
So think before you speak, buddy, because you're judging the wrong crowd. All right.
Yeah. Hashtag something. The what I was going to say is, so I was thinking about the MacGuffin that we're looking at, because we've talked about it, I think, a number of times, how people are not fixed points of space and time, right? Like, they move. So I was thinking, like, what if instead of like a list of force sensitive people, what if it was some secret device that allowed the Jedi to be like, that sort of like some sort of force sensitive thing that like directed the Jedi towards force sensitive people,
right? Like a force GPS.
Yeah, a force finder.
I mean,
well, they already have that, which is just the midichlorian blood counter, but they have to prick people to get their blood to do that. So if you had some kind of scanner that could scan people's blood from a planet away,
not necessarily blood,
need.
But it'd be like, well, they're in like a sort of like a force compass, so like they're in that direction, and then you go to a village and be like, all right, well, direct going towards that house. Line up, kids.
It dings when there's stuff. Yeah, exactly.
So the Jedi come in to scan our kids again.
Ooh.
Yeah, but like,
the line between Jedi and fascists is real thin, isn't it?
Oh man. So that ties into the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which was the robed guy. I don't know if you had said
that was the other
thing
I wanted to talk about.
I don't know if you said everything you wanted to say on him. The thought that I was thinking about for him was, obviously I don't know, I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm guessing because we have to go back to Dathomir that we're not necessarily done with that character. But
he just utterly disappears. Yeah. Like, she summons all the horde of zombies, and then, like, I ran away and then went back to try to find him. It's like I ran away, defeated the, like, 5 that were chasing me, and then went back. I was like, what is he doing? Is he fighting them himself? Is he fighting the big bad witch? What's he doing? But they were just gone. They just despawned.
Yeah. So I was thinking about how he has the potential to be the kind of really interesting villain character of, he was on Team Good, but because of some event or some event or something else, like, his worldview has shifted to or been warped, such that he wants to do something that the rational or the good guy, the rational viewer or the good guy would see as a villain type thing to do, but he sees as the right thing to do based on his warped perspective on the world. So the kind of like because what's the thing is that everybody is the hero of their own story. So it's the bad guy who's doing what he thinks to be the right thing. Thanos wiping out half of the galaxy kind of thing because there's too many people, right?
You also get a rather convoluted story for what he did when he got there. Because you said you read all of the little blurbs that popped up, so first the dude crash lands on the planet, then he goes around slaughtering all the Night Brothers, then he gets captured by the Night Brothers and put in prison, then he gets taken to talk to the lead Night Sister, then then he gets put in control of all of the Night Brothers, and now he's like their low tier god, just because he's able to beat all of them in combat. So like, that was one question I had with him, was like, I don't really get his story flow.
I think he's lying. I think he might be I think he might be lying, is the thing. Like, his story doesn't add up because his story doesn't add up. Like, it's one of those, like, if you think, like, if you did what Rye did and you read all the notes, you go, sounds like the stuff he's saying sounds like bullshit. That's not how this culture works.
That's funny, because that didn't flag when I was doing it, because I was reading all of the notes and then the dude gave all his dialogue, and I guess I didn't really look too closely at them, probably because they're they're so separated. Like I may have read the initial notes about him getting captured like 2 weeks before I actually got to the part where you meet him and do the dialogue with him and that kind of stuff.
That probably would. Yeah, having that actual time separation. I mean, it'll click for you when you come back to Dathomir, I think. It's one of it. I think you've hit on an interesting thing that can happen though, which is like, not to repeat myself for the umpteenth time, but I think it is interesting to note, right? Which is like, part of the reason why I'm so wary of phenomenology as a discipline is what you just said is like a perfectly valid way of experiencing the story, right? Which is like, I played this bit, I went away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever it is, and they came back. And so these two things they weren't in conversation with each other in the way that the text is trying to put them in conversation with each other. Which is perfectly valid. You can be like, hey, this was confusing. That's why, like, I think there is something... There's something about video games where, because you're participating, I think it's a lot easier, I'll say for me personally, I think it's a lot easier for me personally to often miss stuff because I'm focused on, like, because it's mechanic based. So because this is like the 5th or 6th time I'm playing this game, a lot of this stuff for me is like, the mechanics are I can just do them, right? I'm not thinking about the game, I'm not thinking about the gamey parts of the game, I'm thinking about the game as like a whole work, right? And I think stuff like that's kind of interesting to me, because I think next episode, you're either going to come back and be like, yo, this worked for me 100%, or you're going to be like, they dropped the ball on this one. And I'm really, really curious to see where you end up on that, because this character, there's two spoilers here that were the reason that you couldn't Google anything before we got to this level. The first is Taryn's reveal. I don't know why, but that gets spoiled in tons and tons of wikis. And the second is the Night Sister as a central character, I guess. Until we play the next, I guess until she gets named, you can't really Google it, because it's one of those things where you Google it and you're like, Jedi Fallen Order, Night Sister, and then like it'll be like a YouTube video of the most spoilery shit as the first result because of SEO. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious where you end up landing, because for me, the first few times his character didn't land, but then I did what Ride did, and I played the level where I read everything and then went through and I went, oh, this guy's full of shit. Like the second he starts to explain himself, I'm like, this guy's lying. Like, I know enough about this culture to know he's on one and he's trying to get one over on me.
One interesting thing about like Rye's whole point about how like these fallen characters are so interesting, which I totally agree with, but at the same time, I'm also getting so tired of the trope, because it's like always that. Like, you almost never have the fallen hero who's like, I survived it. I'm fine. I'm still mentally stable. I am still a good person. I didn't go around murdering people, and I still do hero stuff, and I just try to keep on the down low so the government doesn't find me. You know? Like, it seems like it's pretty much always the broken hero trope and never the survival hero.
I would disagree with you in the sense of the broken hero trope is Luke. What I was talking about is this is a warped well, so all right, let me back that up. So, well, I guess, but like, if you were to describe like a broken hero, it's like, this is somebody who's been defeated and their worldview is very negative, but instead of being sort of an active participant in events, they've retreated, which is basically what Luke's done in TLJ. But
Obi-Wan in the first film, and
excuse me. But whereas what I'm talking about is like, you have a warped character with a warped worldview, in that he's still taking an active role in things. It's just what he sees as what needs to be done is he sees it as the right thing to do, but like your outside third party character is who hasn't gone through the things that he has been like, no dude, you're on the wrong path now. Does that make sense? So,
yeah,
I mean,
and that's what, like, that's also like Dooku. Like, you're also describing like
Yes.
other characters.
Yes.
And it's just, and like, I'm agreeing that yes, they're interesting, but I'm saying that I think there's too many of them because you just don't have as many. Because that character who still has agency to me is the same as a character who was broken. They still are heroes who broke, and you just so rarely have heroes who don't break. And that's what I would like to see more of in these type of stories.
But those,
that's
those
just
are,
I
those
think
are
that's
good
just
guys, though.
yeah. I mean that's I think it's two things there, right? That's largely a symptom of like coming out of the 90s, early 2000s postmodernism, right? Like structuralism went away, formalism went away. It was all postmodernism. It's hot. It's hot. I think it's this is gonna be a big generalization, but I think it's probably largely true. The last 20 years, it has been difficult to write optimistic stories about things because of the way the world is going, and which is part of why postmodernism took off in such a big way. I think, you go back to those stories of modernism, the 40s and 50s, and your kind of picaresque stories and things like that. And those characters exist, but they always ring a little bit hollow because they lack the sophistication of the postmodern kind of movement. And so where we're at now is like this meta-modern movement where it's all storytellers telling stories about what it's like to tell stories, right? There's this like third layer that's happening. But I think a big part of it is just like a lot of artists feels like the world's ending. It's really, really hard to just write people that are functioning well. And also, like, if you think about what happened in the 60s and 70s with the French and Russian philosophy movement and things like that, it's also increasingly hard to not imagine people as deconstructible or being able to disassemble into constituent parts and have interior psychologies of characters, which often lends to what you're talking about, which is like, you can't just have a good guy. It has to be a good guy plus or a good guy minus or a good guy but. And the second thing I would say is those stories still exist. A lot of the Spider-Man stories tend to be like that, where Peter Parker never really changes and he's just kind of a good guy. But I think they're pretty... Superman is probably a good example of that when done well, which hasn't been on film for a long time. Absent maybe Superman Returns, but that's pretty sketchy. Those stories exist, you're right. They're just not popular in the they're not going to be your big blockbuster stories. They're not going to be your big franchise stories. They're going to be your A24s, your art house films, and things like that are probably a bit more experimental in that space. Ironically experimental in that space, because everything is, as Felix would say, the homogeny of media genders towards passivity. And one of the things about passivity is this question of creating these characters who behave and feel like they've lost their agency, and exactly what you said, which is like they once had agency and that agency is gone. And that's because it feels like in the world people have lost their agency. There is a general passivity that the media creates that infantilizes people into that passivity. And it's like there are stories out there that do that, but unfortunately you have to go looking for them. They're not going to be your popular media.
I have a question to clarify what you're trying to get at, Darth, is when you're saying you're tired of these kinds of characters, are you saying as antagonists or as the eventual outcome for protagonists?
I think maybe I just mean as it could just be an additional character. Like it's fine to have the Dooku who falls. So like a really good example I just came up with is in the beginning of the Obi-Wan series, when the Inquisitors are in the bar and they throw the knife at the woman, and the Jedi, whoever the unnamed Jedi is there, he stops the knife. He does the hero thing. He's still a hero. He saves the woman at the cost of his own life and is immediately executed because the story does not want a hero to remain a hero. They want to examine the broken hero, the fallen hero. And that is what I would like to see that character continue on. Like the epic scene we have of his master, like later on, like as a flashback, like find a Jedi like that who's hiding out in the wilderness and is successfully defeating the stormtroopers who come after him, who is successfully continuing to help people, who can successfully help the protagonist through their journey. Like, you never get stuff like that.
So
because it's...
I would say the argument at the beginning of Obi-Wan that you're talking about is, I think it's the what's it, Riva, or is it the Grand Inquisitor that's speaking during that? But I think whichever one of them is speaking is saying we can find and defeat these Jedi because they are unable to stay hidden. And like the point that Obi-Wan's making, like when the guy comes, he's like, oh God, it's you, it's Obi-Wan, and you know, I've finally found you. And Obi-Wan's like, take that shit, bury it in the desert, and that's the only way you're gonna stay alive. And the guy doesn't do that, and he ends up dead. So I think what you're talking about is the Inquisitor's argument. There is, we will find you. If that's the hero that you are, we will find you and we will kill you.
Yeah.
Eventually. Yeah.
There's so many ways you can think about it. I mean, I think the simplest argument, or the most distilled version of like what that is getting at, is like individual people can't defeat like a fascist empire. Like, it takes systems and revolution and rebellion, heroism manifested that way doesn't get the job done when the thing that, like, when the threat is at such an existential level. So I get what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. I think you would have to set your story in a very different, if you wanted to do a Star Wars story, for example, you have to set it in a very different time and place. I just think under the Empire, it doesn't engender itself to those types of characters because the Empire is such an existential threat. Like, they control reality, right? Like, they are in charge of everything.
So like,
but
if you were a Jedi, like, the whole reason that they're there is like, we heard that there was a Jedi here. So if you were the kind of character that you're talking about, who fought back or stood up for people, or did all the Jedi stuff, or continued to do the Jedi things, and won, if you did that on this planet, you would have to leave, because they would send everything to come and to find you and kill you. And then you would be on some different planet, and you would do the Jedi thing there, and people would hear about it, and they would send, again, you would have to leave, because again, they would send everything to come and kill you. So in the context of, or in the universe or the system that Star Wars has at the height of the Empire, that kind of character is, the only way that they survive is to be Obi-Wan or Yoda or Cal, which is to go dark.
Yeah. Yeah. You're either a dead protagonist or you have to walk away. Is those are your two up. And like, those things, those stories, Rogue One is a story like that, where it's like, yeah, it turns out like doing this is going to get you killed, probably. Like, or like Luthen and Andor, like there isn't a good outcome for these people. And like, I really just think it's like a symptom of the times, honestly. Like, it's kind of funny because a really good example of what I'm talking about, which is also a really bad example, is the Ahsoka show. Because it was not done great, but Ahsoka is what I'm talking about. She went through the trauma, was not traumatized, continued to do the hero stuff. Whether or not she's eventually, like, I'm not talking about like the one person taking down the entire empire or anything like that. I'm just talking about like, you were a hero, you don't break, you stay a hero. Like, that's the basis of what I'm talking about. And that just doesn't poorly, but you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
And pretty much the whole crew there, even though they made the one girl, like, broken after, I've lost everyone's names. That's just terrible.
Welcome to my world. Talking about Sabine?
For Ahsoka, I would say that she did that within she did that she survived the Empire period, but she did that within the structure of the rebellion. She was not lone wolf in it.
Yeah. Because we learn in
she was Fulcrum.
She was Fulcrum. Yeah. So that's right. Yeah. So she doesn't survive by being a lone wolf. She survives by being part of the systematic resistance to the existential threat.
And then she just disappears for a while.
Then she goes and does it. I would watch/read just a series of like anthology picaresque stories of just like what a little adventure she got up to when she disappeared. Just her going to like exactly what Darth wants. Her going to random planets, solving problems, having to leave when the Empire's on her tail. That'd be fun. I'd be here for that.
You want to get back on because I feel like we actually have a lot to talk about still.
I have one more note. So if you have, I mean, my main thing is like, I mean, we talked about Terran a little bit. What else have you got?
So prior to the ex-Jedi even showing up, we go into the temple, we try to open the door, we can't. You go, a meditation point shows up, so you think it's a save point, and you click on it, and then you go into the whole flashback sequence.
I forgot about that.
So you flash back, and you're now a 10-year-old, and this is in your Padawan stage, and I think first you do a training thing where you have to climb up the platform, so it's a little platformer moment, and then Order 66 starts, and your master gives you instructions for where you're supposed to run. So you start running away while he just goes off and starts butchering stormtroopers because he's awesome.
He's pretty
and
rad.
Yeah, I adored how they wrote him. And I kept feeling like that whole sequence was in the wrong spot. Like I felt like it just totally detracted from where I was supposed to be in the story, and that whole thing should have been like at the beginning of the game, or more towards the beginning of the game, like when he's trying to remember all of his force powers and stuff. Like I don't understand the purpose of having it here. I didn't feel like it actually taught you anything, and the little story bits that came out of it that Seer referenced when they were talking later, I didn't understand at all how it tied in with her stuff. Because she was saying, look, I understand how you feel. You feel responsible for not saving your master because you couldn't save him, even though he was a child and couldn't literally save him. And she was like, as a comparison, I use the dark side to murder all of these people, so I know how you feel. I don't understand what this flashback was supposed to do to tie in the message of what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I think they just fire a shot and it misses the bow, I think is what happens there. The idea is that he feels responsible for not saving his master, and Seer feels responsible for not saving her apprentice. Cal's passivity and not taking action, or inability to take action, like you said, is what gets his master killed. And Seer's choice of action is what ends up pushing Trilla to the dark side. They're trying to run parallel track there between those two ideas, and I don't think it lands. But that's the idea.
Ironically, one thing that makes earlier gameplay make more sense to me is that the kid was way younger than I would have anticipated. So him forgetting all of these things actually makes a whole lot more sense after going through all of the trauma and only being 10 years old or whatever age that he would have been. And I was thinking that he was like 15, 16 or something. I don't know why, but I guess that's what you kind of see a lot of apprentices. You tend to see them be older when you're talking about Jedi stuff for some reason.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
No, Yoda thinks that Anakin's too old.
He's too old. And he was right. It turns out he was right.
Yeah, they're all right.
There's so many bad jokes now about the Jedi liking the children young.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a homogenous monastic religious order. Let's not. It's almost like stories are about things. Boy.
So,
yes.
Ryan, what did you think about that whole flashback?
The main. There were two main things. The first one was, I agree. I don't know what the right word is, but like I always my Inerthosaurus isn't that great, so I always just think of like the incongruous feeling of like what he's saying and me going, I don't really get that, like what you're talking about at the end. And then the bigger than that for me was the Order 66. This led me off into like a whole wild train of thought, but like Order 66 happens and like his master, what is this master's name?
Jaro T'Pol.
T'Pol? Okay. Oh, from Enterprise, T'Pol. And
I don't know that's where they got it, but yeah.
So like the Order 66 comes in and T'Pol just murks the guy. And just before this, that guy had been helping in Cal's training. And Cal had been like, hey, good morning, guys, and everything. He was like, hey, man, you're off to training early or whatever. Like, that led me down the train of thought of, I think only in the Clone Wars, the last episode of the Clone Wars, did you actually get to see that, like, from the real betrayal that there was with, like, they were clones, but they had personalities and names, and that differentiated them from other people, and they built relationships with these clones. And for T'Pol just to like, I don't know. To me, I feel like it says a lot about the Jedi. It says a lot about how they feel about the clones and everything like that. That he just like, no thought at all, just kills them. And then it's just like very stoic, like doesn't for a second go, what the fuck was that? You know, like, oh my god, I just had to kill Commander Cody or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, because they don't view them as like, for the most part, the Jedi don't view clones as people. Anakin and Obi-Wan. The way I sometimes think about it is Anakin and Obi-Wan, particularly in the Clone Wars series, they are like the A-team. They are the superstars of the Jedi Order. And it means that they get to do things differently and behave differently without certain consequence. Everyone else, I mean, and they still do to an extent, but everyone else treats the clones like droids. They aren't people. They're clones. Yeah. Right? Anakin and Obi-Wan have a different relationship to them because of the type of people they are, and because Qui-Gon, they sort of inherit Qui-Gon and Dooku's lineage there.
Ahsoka too.
Yeah. Ahsoka, yeah, and Ahsoka by proxy, of course, yes. I think what's interesting is, I can't remember which episode of the Clone Wars it is, but it's early on, in, I want to say season 2 maybe, where one of the clones is like, yeah, like, obviously this is how you kill a Jedi, and is able to like explain it without like, he just knows how you kill a Jedi. And there becomes this question of like, and I wish the Clone Wars was more interested in this. It feels like something Filoni just can't quite find, but like, is this always something that's within them? Is this yeah, like we want to ace the Jedi, or we always know how to if we need to at the drop of a hat, and then vice versa. Are the Jedi always waiting for the other shoe to drop with this army? Is there some aspect of the Jedi where, because they don't treat them as people, and because there is something about this that's too convenient, they're at once always ready to take action and kill these guys? And that, the dichotomy of those two relationships, in that the Jedi have to trust and rely on these people in order to help them fight this unwinnable war, and this sense of like, commander and troop might seem to be prepared to turn on each other at any second, is why they don't win, right? Because the other side has the droids, and the droids just always do what you say. And so there is this like, I mean, obviously it's a proxy war, and there's a whole other conversation to be had about the parallels to Vietnam and things like that in Afghanistan, but like, there's something there, and I can't access it in this story because like Darth said, this doesn't fit.
Well, because you're right. It's also not interested in that. But just to be clear, like I wasn't saying that like it was wrong. What I was saying, or it was like like you just said, it says something about about their relationship, or the Jedi relationship to the clones, or rather in this particular instance, this specific Jedi's really, because you guys, I think in that one scene talked about how like the Wookiees are being like, or they see Yoda just murk those the two guys, and they're just like, Jesus, what the hell was that? You know, and because they don't know what's going on, but they just accept it when Yoda just kills them like that. But it's a little bit of the same thing where, like, I can understand. I don't know, what am I trying to say? No, I think to me, I'd sort of tied the two ideas together of the broken robed guy, quote unquote broken robe guy, or warped robe guy, or however you want to call him. I forget his name, Tamron, something like that. And
Taran.
And how like T'Pol kills not that guy, but then kills the guy behind him, and then a whole bunch more clones, like in a Darth Vader-esque hallway kind of manner, right out of Rogue One. So he's brutal in his like killings of these guys, and he kills a bunch of them that he may or may not have had a relationship with. And so to me, or what I was thinking of, like when I was thinking of how this robed guy has sort of a warped view on things, is what does that do to your psychology that you were betrayed by potentially this group of subordinates that you trusted and maybe had good relationships with. And I think a lot of people give crap to the Clone Wars for the chip thing, because that didn't exist before. But I find that as a very plausible, realistic explanation of how you get around that relationship problem. Right?
Part of what's then interesting, I mean, this is like, we can talk about this for literally hours, is there are clones that they read the room and they see what's happening even before the chip is activated. There's something in the clones as people, and maybe it's because of who they're cloned from and they inherit some aspect. Like, there are so many questions of agency when it comes to clones, because some clones seem to know that Jedi are the bad guys. Like, that is a thing we get in Clone Wars. And yeah, I mean, it's just like it's the most interesting part of that whole era, is like the things that Clone Wars keeps reaching for and then backing away from. And yeah, I mean, you're right. This story just it's not interested in that, and kind of won't be, but will instead focus more on the Jedi side of it. And
remember, that's literally part of their training manual. It's like, lock the door when you go outside of it. This is the access code for the blah, blah, blah. And if the Jedi turn evil, then kill them. So they were all literally trained from birth to kill the Jedi if ordered to. So you're exactly right. Yeah, they had this in the back of their mind, literally. And they were supposed to be like biologically bred to not question orders. So the idea that the chips had to be implemented for it to make sense doesn't necessarily track, because if you're biologically bred to not question an order, then why do you need an extra chip to do something that your body doesn't want to do in the first place?
So what I'm saying is that you start with that argument, but then again, extrapolate or run that thought out, and you have 7 seasons of Ahsoka piling around with Rex, and to imagine that Rex would get an order to kill Ahsoka and not go and just immediately carry it out with no other, like, not being like, whoa, hold on, that last transmission was garbled. Do you want to run that back to me again?
Yeah. And that's one really interesting thing that I think they could have done a whole lot with, is that most of the troopers did not have that personal relationship with the Jedi. So it would have been a very, very small percentage of the troopers who would have been loyal to them and would have tried to help them escape or whatever. So you don't need to try to control the whole vast army and put chips in every single clone. You just have to be able to control the ones that are in close proximity and have those relationships. Or just like if he knows he's going to order 66, then he's just like, hey, call in Commander Cody. He needs to come off the line for a little while. You know, put someone else in that is not loyal to Obi-Wan.
God, that's such a good point. I mean, but that's the problem, is that the people that they are going to be closest to are going to be your A-team. They're going to be your superstar Jedi who have superpowers who are going to sense it coming. It's like a Kobayashi Maru scenario. If you try and move the pieces on the board, they're going to sense that you're making a play and realize what's coming. And so that's such a good point. God, like, that's an interesting story right there.
Right.
Damn. Anyway, I mean, yeah, look,
So that was my takeaway from the flashbacks.
Yeah. Flashback mid. That's the takeaway there. Okay, do you have anything else that you want to touch on, Darth? Because I think that was my big point there was, I had just written down clones, huh? That's my last note.
So, well, I loved everything about the flashback except the, like, story connection of it. Like I adored being in the ship and fighting the troopers and running in the hallways and like all this stuff and like you're going through the grate, you see your master slaughtering the people underneath you while you're running along. I loved everything about it except the story. So but then there's another flashback, which maybe not flashback, but when you come out of that flashback, then you can go through the door and there you fight the evil ghost version of your master. And again, I don't understand what the point of that was, what they were trying to do and how that's supposed to tie in to the overall story, and then how he crushed his lightsaber with his human hands.
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you because it does. I don't know.
Okay. I just want to know that other people are confused and it's not just me missing something. That's
No, in my summary I did say his mentor breaks his lightsaber in real life somehow, like it does. I guess the Force or something, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Ray?
No. It was like, story needed it to happen.
Yeah.
Really intense moment. Crushes his lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's like they knew that they need his lightsaber to be broken, and they didn't have a way for it to happen. So they're like, we have to write a way for it to be broken. So let's do this.
Okay. Question for you: how many of you? Two of the two of you. How many of you? When the zombie apocalypse happened at the end of the mission, how many of you took a swing at the zombies before realizing you didn't have a lightsaber anymore?
Yeah.
David?
I've played this, boys. I've played this game too many times. I'm on another level. I was out the door before they even looked at me, man.
I would see like that part. I was like, I took one swing and I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm like, oh, I'll just do this how I normally do it. I just ran and force pushed.
Yeah.
So one thing is that I wish that they had more of them, because there were only actually like 5 that spawn up there that are chasing you. So immediately I was like, okay, the only thing I could do is force push them off of the cliff. So I ran to the left when you come out of the doors, and there's like a rock wall tunnel thing that goes over. So I like jump over the dude that's shooting you with the crossbow, and then I try to force push all of them as they're coming towards me over the rock thing, and then they all fall off and die, and I'm like, okay, I win. What now? And then I went back and looked for the dude, and he had despawned and the woman had despawned, so I was like, okay, I guess I go back to the ship now.
Oh, so you really ruined the dramatic tension piece.
I did. Yeah. That's why I wish there had been more of them that had like just swarmed me too much. I mean, I know if I'd played harder levels, they would have one-shot me, but if they had just swarmed me so that I literally had to run instead of just choosing to run because there was nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, another good argument for playing the game, one could say.
Yeah. Now that I've learned the mechanics finally, I might be able to bump up the difficulty a little.
Just as the game gets hard. Yeah, good timing.
So
Yeah.
the very last note that I have, which I guess before getting to that, like running back to the ship and not having your lightsaber was kind of like weirdly eye-opening. It like literally made me feel defenseless in real life, which was very odd. I did not expect that. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's video games, man. It's one of those like it's ludology right there. The game made you feel a thing by giving or taking away a way of engaging with it. It's good stuff.
So there's one I was going to talk about it, and then I realized this is actually part of the Ilum thing, but I'm going to have to say it now because I'll probably forget by the time we get around to that. But do you know how like the Night Sister red attack is to grab you, or at least on story mode?
Yes.
Yes. The Night
I
Sister.
think they do like a grab like this.
Yeah, they grab, and you have to like quick time event to get out of it. So the do you remember like the K2 robots? The battle droids that the Empire has. So there's
they do a grab too.
There was a room full of them on Elam that I went into, and there was a moment where I had defeated all of them except for 3, and they were all on top of me at the same time, and they started to chain their red attacks, which is they grab you by the throat and shake you around and then throw you into the ground. And so it was incredibly annoying / hilarious because like I'm on story mode, so they're not really doing that much damage, but like it's basically this robot like grabs me, throttles me by the neck, and then throws me into the ground, and then I get up, and then the next one grabs me by the neck and throttles me and throws me to the ground, and then I get up, and the next one grabs me by the neck. It did this for like minutes, and I was like let me out of here, Jesus. So
just being punished.
Yeah, just pummeled by these robots.
If only you just unlocked a skill that was specifically designed to deal with groups of enemies.
Well, I mean, I had done that, but like the problem was at this point where like it was the chaining effect. Like it was effectively a chain stun.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything except stand up and get throttled.
Listen, that'll happen. That's a classic Dark Souls scenario. Just getting ganked by a bunch of dudes. Not being able to stop it. So that's the true experience.
So last note that I had on this level was we already had touched on was you have this big moment of exposition with Seer, where she says, I used the dark side, I murdered everyone except Trilla, and I let her live. Which I guess as a side note, all of these stories have that same theme where the master lets their apprentice live and then the apprentice just keeps going on slaughtering people. And I'm just like, can we just kill the bad people and instead of being kind to them? Because it doesn't work.
And Trilla was already an Inquisitor, which is why she killed everybody.
Well, so this is the paradox at the heart of the Jedi, right? Which is masters take on apprentices, but one of the core tenets of the Jedi Order is like no connections, don't form connections. That's going to be a problem. You want to like separate yourself from the physical world. At the same time, raise this person as your surrogate child. And it's like that dichotomy is like what creates that problem.
Which
like,
is something that's something that a lot of the fans were so upset about with how the sequels were handled, because Luke completely redid the Jedi Order because you cannot operate like that. Like humans, quote unquote, cannot operate without an emotional attachment. And if you know you biologically cannot do this, then reform your religion around what you can, what you actually are going to do. So they rebuilt it where the Jedi can have wives and have families, and they embraced their relationships, and they had to learn to teach themselves, when this person dies, how do I not fall to the dark side? How is this going to be part of my religion, knowing that I am going to embrace relationships because relationships make me stronger. Love is what is going to save Darth Vader. It's, blah, blah, blah. So there's so much more that could have been done with this future story that got just erased when Disney took over.
Yeah.
Well, there's a much like there have been so many hours of podcasts and books and internet arguments of people discussing what the Force is and how it works and what does attachments mean and everything like that. And like the really good ideas from Lucas, or the explanations that I've heard from himself, is like the difference in what he's talking about there, of the idea of pleasure and joy. Have you ever heard that stuff, David?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've heard pleasure and joy.
So-
I've heard a couple different things.
So what he was talking about is like that's kind of how you think of like the dark side and the light side of the Forces. You know, pleasure is not like true happiness, because it's temporary, and that kind of attachment, that is the kind of attachment that you do not want a Jedi to have, because the pleasure aspect, it's temporary, and it leads to you want more of it. It leads to selfishness, etc. Whereas joy is more on the sort of like love aspect of it, or where you do something nice for somebody and you feel joy or whatever. I forget how he explains it, but it's like there's joy is like ever present and pleasure is temporary, and you seek pleasure, whereas like you experience joy.
Yeah. It's a Buddhist thing that he's cribbing on. Like it's you seek pleasure and you discover joy. It's the sort of a different way of thinking about attachment. And that's sort of, I mean, if you read like the Bardo Todol, that's like a big part of Tibetan Buddhism is this quite, I mean, if you think about the Jedi Order playing in the Asian mysticism space in ways in which there's a whole different conversation to be had there, but it's this question of like attachment. Attachment is, life is suffering, and attachment only heightens that suffering. And it's about being stateless, and it's about learning to flow with life and the universe, and not resisting it or putting yourself first, and instead making service of others and service to the universe your priority, and in doing so discovering joy. And that's sort of, I guess that's where the original conceit of the Jedi sort of comes from. And then obviously Lucas himself pushes that in a different direction with the prequels, right? Like when he attaches them to the paramilitary industrial complex of the clones and America, basically, right, by way of the Senate, that's obviously changing the mode in which that's working. But yeah, I mean, certainly the original series, that's the case.
Well, there was.
But yes, you're right.
There was I don't remember if this was a line somewhere in Star Wars. I want to say that it was, but it was a sort of it was a thing in Game of Thrones, where I think Jon Stark like runs away from the wall or something like that, and the guys come after him or whatever, and I think it might be the Grand Master that's talking to him, the Grand Master of the Black Watch or Night's Watch or whatever. Y'all are familiar with Game of Thrones, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure it's like the head of the Night's Watch that's like, John's like, well, I failed. I went off to Molestown or whatever like that. He's like, come on, like, we swear this oath, and we're like, they have a no attachments oath too, right? No families or whatever. It's like, come on, like, you think nobody sneaks over to the whorehouse in Molestown? Come on, like, it happens all the time, bud. They may say that, but
Yeah, that's the unspoken thing that's happening with the Jedi, right? And you get that in Clone Wars explicitly, where like Obi-Wan doesn't know about Anakin and Padme, but he knows. Anakin doesn't know about Obi-Wan and Ventress, but he knows. Like, there is this double think that is required to make this thing work, and it's unsustainable. Which was Darth's point about, like, what do you do? Like, the Jedi fail. Like, they fail and the Empire happens, and the response that Luke has to that, at least in the canon, right, is to repeat the same mistake, to like rebuild it as it was, realize it's a mistake, and then go, fuck, I don't have an answer here. And isn't the guy who has the answer in the story that they end up telling. He just doesn't have it. And they don't seem to know, because it's Disney, that because Disney doesn't Disney's such a broad, but like, because those, let me say it this way, because the sequels don't have a political view, they are incapable of levying an argument one way or the other about the Jedi Order, which is your point, Darth, right? They say, yeah, maybe Jedi was bad, or the I almost called it the first Jedi, the Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is pretty clear that, like, hey, the Jedi as a structure wasn't working. But because the closest they can come to politics is this vague gesture at, like, ignite the spark of hope, and that's the closest they ever come. That's not even, like, but that's it. They just don't have any political view. They can't levy a suggestion, or they can't have characters levy suggestions of what it should be instead. Because say what you will about Lucas and everything that he was doing, but those prequels, like, deeply, deeply political, and it lets them try and say stuff and gesture toward things and challenge things. And yeah, I mean, those sequel stories just don't, because they don't have a point of view. And they're just absent politics except for that second film. So it is a huge missed opportunity. And weirdly, something that this series ends up becoming about, right? The second story that we'll cover at some point really is about all that stuff. It's all about the stuff that you were just talking about, Darth, which is like, what would a functional Jedi Order have to look like? And what does that mean? And what assumptions would that require you as an existing Jedi to challenge and overcome? And how do you, like, yeah, what does attachment mean? And if humans need that, how do you balance that against this disciplinary thing that you've been taught? But yeah, I mean, this story doesn't get there, but is at least dipping its toes in.
It would be a really interesting. Back, yeah. It would be a really interesting discussion, and a long one, of what the Jedi Order should be, because a religious order doesn't need to be a police state, but they act as both. Anyway, could be a whole long, interesting discussion. But since you brought up Disney,
6 hours.
It was a really interesting quote that I just saw, which apparently was from back in November, that Disney's CEO Bob Iger had announced it, like, in an interview, that they needed to stop focusing so much on pushing agendas and messaging and go back to focusing on stories. And at first I was like, duh, like, that seems so freaking obvious, but can we just get to a point where, like, yes, we're not having to dissect all of these, different, this video game or this movie or this TV show. We're not trying to go back and reconstruct it. Like, they could just focus on a good story from the get-go.
So,
and
can I jump in and try to save David from having an aneurysm? So, if I am, my hopeful read of that is, like, the messaging that Iger is talking about, I feel, is different than the kind of storytelling, not necessarily storytelling is the wrong word, but the kind of point of view that Lucas was putting forward in the prequels. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, like, there's the word of the day is woke, right? So I think that is what he's talking about. And sort of, like, as opposed, and I don't see those as the same thing as having a point of view, or having a point of view and saying, like, okay, you could take this story, and what is that story saying about this thing that we're dealing with? That story can still, or you could take a good story and have it still be a commentary on something that's happening in the real world, but and express a point of view, and that can, I feel that can be separate from messaging, I think.
Yes, it's just a fucking dumb thing to say. Like,
I don't necessarily
it's
agree.
just a.
I am hopeful. I am hopeful that what I'm saying is makes sense.
If this is too complicated to unpack. If you're right, that would be interesting. My most generous read is in the rawest form, and I don't mean this in any particular valence other than descriptive. It sounds like, and I don't know the context for the comment, but it sounds like virtue signaling to a particular portion of the audience who have decided what the problem is. And any time that you say, hey, it's going to be stories like the old times, they go, great, because they've already decided what they think the problem is. That's my most generous read of that, is like trying to get people back on board who have decided that the woke thing has happened and that's what makes the stories bad, which it's like the opposite is true, right? That's my most generous read. I mean, it seems like one of those like things that you say in order to make people who already think a particular way want to invest in what you're going to do next in the hopes of fixing your bottom line, right? To me, that's a statement about business more than it is a statement about storytelling. Because if it is literally what he means, it's just a fucking stupid thing to say.
That's why he shouldn't be writing anything.
Well, he's not. Yeah. Thankfully. Stay in the boardroom. Be quiet.
Hire creative people.
So I guess finishing up, I had mentioned when Sierra's talking about how she killed all the people, and I had said like really early on I didn't get how her story is supposed to make Cal feel better at all about revisiting how he as a child couldn't help his master. So.
Well, yeah. So, all right, you reminded me of something. What I was gonna say is that I think if it would have landed, or him feeling that way would have landed better if he had made a mistake. Like that we've talked about before. Yes. The arc of a character of like, you make this mistake, you get punished for it. You learn from that mistake, and then later on you're presented with a similar scenario, and you make the right decision based on what you've learned. And there you have a very, very basic arc. I think it would have been more impactful him feeling bad if he had made a mistake. Because he was like, "Oh, I didn't listen." Like when did he not listen?
Well, he dropped his lightsaber.
Like, when did you not do more?
So you could argue that was the mistake, was he dropped his lightsaber and then his master immediately was like, "You dropped your lightsaber. I warned you about this."
I guess.
Which is just
dumb.
That barely qualifies to hold up your side of the argument. I don't think he made enough of a mistake for him to feel bad at all about the situation.
Yeah.
And even if he had his lightsaber, based on the skills that we see him portray, because like he doesn't do anything to show that he's strong until he gets angry and uses, I assume, the dark side to freeze all of the troopers. So like even if he had his lightsaber, I don't know that he could have blocked anything. I don't know that he would have been a help right there when his master was killed.
Yeah.
Is the simple fix you have him run? His master's like, "Stand with me," and he runs away because he's scared, and that's where we start the game with him. Right? Is him in hiding. And then it's him stepping forward and being a Jedi.
Being the Jedi that Darth wants him to be.
Courage. Yeah.
Well, he's not.
Yeah.
The whole story, he is not suffering with survivor's guilt or anything like that in a way that I've observed. And it's like now they're introducing that he feels so responsible for his master's death, and he's like weeping on the floor when Sierra's talking to him because he feels so guilty about it. Did he like suppress that this whole time?
Yes.
And he just literally didn't remember?
Yeah.
That is how I would read that. Is that he's rediscovering these things. And
okay.
Yeah, he's buried this stuff deep and dark.
The other fix that I would want to do to actually tie it in with the story that she then says is it's got to be something like, is she trying to say, I used the dark side, I killed people, I know how you feel, it's okay? Or is she saying, I used the dark side, I killed people, don't be like me? So either have him like use the dark side to kill the troopers right before his master dies, so his master's last sight is seeing his apprentice turn to the dark side, and then tie that in with what Seer says, and now you could go forward with like actual, you know, but they don't do anything to tie them together in a really good way.
Something else that's also kind of interesting, and I realize that we're running up on our time here, but something else that's kind of interesting is the story doesn't seem to think the dark side is inherently bad. Sarah and Cal do, but I think especially with the Dathomir stuff, it's kind of playing in the space of like, you guys might be hung up on a morality system that is no longer relevant. Like, this mattered because the Jedi and the Sith, but like that's done now. Like, maybe it's time to rethink your perspective on these things. And you're right, Darth. That would be a really, really interesting lever to pull. Is the disappointment would be his master seeing him turn to the dark side, and Seer having to say like, yeah, you might have disappointed him, but it's different now. Like, you have to realize it's different now. Those rules don't apply anymore, right? And that could be kind of interesting too.
So what you're talking about is, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. The idea of a gray Jedi. Oh, I hate it so much.
I know we can't do this now. I just think, to me, it would be interesting. I realize that we had this conversation like 5 times.
Yeah.
But yes, go on. Explain.
I was just gonna because we have had that discussion. I was just gonna say that right there. Although there is definitely an audience for that. I think, or as an audience for exploring that idea, I think you would find a lot of people interested in that. But my issue with how the dark side, or use of the dark side, is portrayed now is that characters seem to be able to tap into that sort of at will and not really suffer any consequences for it, which is kind of goes against the whole idea of the using the light and the dark.
That's ironically something I really want. I just wrote down, David and I need to do a one scene on Grey Jedi, because I want to talk so much about it, because I adore the methodology that Mace developed, because that would totally be what I would go towards, which I don't know if that qualifies as a Grey Jedi or not, because there's a difference in murdering people and using anger when you're fighting, because that's just biologically making yourself stronger and faster and blah 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 blah.
The character that I have in mind for you for when we do our role-playing game, you basically just describe them. It's like, I bet Darth would like to play someone that might cross the line a little bit, but always believes they're doing the right thing. Interesting. Yes, we could and have and will talk about that kind of thing for hours. I think it's interesting. I guess part of my concern with this story and where it goes is we're rapidly running out of runway in the story for these things to land. And so I'm going to be really, really curious in the next session as we kind of come toward, because I guess the next session is going to be like the penultimate playthrough, and then we'll have the finale. I'm kind of interested to see where you guys land, because I don't know that the story is yet interested in the stuff you guys are talking about, right? Like, I'm not sure it has quite figured out the themes it's interested in, other than the kind of trauma and the survivor's guilt that Darth just explained, right? That kind of sneaks up on Cal, right? He's suppressed that in some capacity. And it...
Were you have more?
No, you go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but right there at the end, doesn't Seer pull out her old lightsaber and hand it to him?
Yeah, he needs the Christ.
I haven't done any of Ilum yet, but I thought she was just letting him use hers while he went off to find his own crystal or whatever.
I think hers is broken too.
No, I don't think she gives him her lightsaber.
She hands him something, and it looked like a lightsaber.
I think it's just the lightsaber that he has.
He had his in his hands because he was like cradling it while he was crying, and then she handed him a cylinder of something. I may have a clip of it, but the point I was trying to make was that if that was her saber, it says something kind of interesting about her, that she kept it the whole time, because she seemed to be so cut off from that entire life that she would have wanted to completely get rid of it, you know? So the idea that she kept it, I kind of was going back and forth on.
Yeah. I feel like...
Y'all are gonna giggle at this. I went to try to build my own lightsaber and see if it would still work when you did the light up phase, and it was broken like it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Nice. Gameplay.
I love that. Somebody's like, I'll bet you somebody's going to try to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%. Like, nah, it don't work, buddy.
I'm that guy.
I'm that guy. I mean, that's pretty much everything I've got. Should we wrap her up there?
Yep.
Oh. I found the clip.
Oh.
And on.
Yeah, that is her lightsaber.
Okay, but
So,
that makes sense. Because I know where this is going. Because he, you know the unlock you get, right?
Yeah.
On Ilum.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
So you use half her lightsaber for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was just an interesting side note. Like, she, in my mind, that signifies she has not given up on being a Jedi. She just needed the call to action to bring her back into the fight, because she was still holding on to that part of her life in the form of having that lightsaber. Although that analogy is kind of like ruined when she just hands it away willy-nilly. So it's like she was keeping Excalibur to hand to the next person, and she wasn't keeping it for herself, maybe.
She's the wizard, not the knight errant, right?
Yeah, she's not worthy of it anymore.
Yeah.
In her mind.
Yeah.
All right, good talk.
Well, that's a sad note, but okay.
Yeah, what a grim note to end on. Okay, next session.
It's time to end.
Next session we'll be covering Ilum, and then there's no way to say this without spoiling it. Basically, you're gonna play until you learn the location of the holocron, and you'll come back to the ship, and characters will be like, "This is it, our final destination." So we're basically playing up until the final mission starts. So it's not a lot, but I imagine it'll take Darth quite a bit of time. So yeah, learn where the holocron is, and when the characters start to tell you that, hey, this is it, this is the end game, is where we'll be playing through till. Pluggables, Darth, what do you got? Where can people find you? YouTube, Darth, go find it. Star Wars essays. What do you got coming up? Anything fun?
I don't know about fun, but I'm working, which I may have said last time, but I've been working for a while finishing up the last big part of my wasted character sequence. Yes. And it's currently right under 7 hours long.
Nice. Yeah. So really shooting for some David length, huh? 7 hours. Jesus.
Yeah, that has hurt me. It has hurt to edit because, like, you zoom out on the timeline and you can't even see the work that I've been doing for weeks. So
you gotta start nesting files is what I've started doing. My Walking Dead thing. I'm up to I don't even want to think about it. Yes. I mean, go check that out when it eventually comes out. I'm sure it'll be very, very good. You can also go find that one scene. We will definitely have to do a pickup of the Grey clone Jedi stuff, because that's so Grey Jedi clone stuff.
When are we gonna talk about Rebel Moon?
Oh my god, yeah. We gotta do that at some point. Darth?
I am putting it on my watch list right now.
God. Me and my brother just sat there the whole time, and every third scene we were like, "Ooh, it's from this other film." It was like a who's who. It's like, "Oh, that's Matrix 2 on the bridge with Morpheus." Oh, look, that's Thor Ragnarok. It was ridiculous. Yes, we have to talk about that absolute train wreck of a film. Anyway, Rye, you got anything? Rybold on YouTube.
Yep, Rybold on YouTube. Nothing new.
Go check it out. Go watch all of them. Go watch the hyperspace one. That's one of my faves. It involves maths, which is something I would simply never do. As always, you can find everything we do at zeroindent.com, and you can find all of our merch and books at underink.press. That'll do it for this one. We'll be back for our penultimate episode, playing until we learn where the holocron is and begin the end game. Thanks so much for watching or listening wherever you find it. You guys know the drill. Do the engagement stuff. It helps more people find the show. And we will catch you next episode. And as we always say, boys, what's the famous Star Wars outro?
May the Force be with you always.
Goodbye there.
Nice. Goodbye there. Fuck off. Ridiculous.
That's the outro right there.
Yeah, Jesus.